Ginger Cadlick, and I am the executive director for the Traverse Bay Children's Advocacy Center. And we are thrilled to be able to have you join us for our, gosh, this is our first MDT related webinar. Michelle Corrao, who is our guest speaker today, actually spoke with our community a few weeks back and did a wonderful job. Actually, she is amazing, and you're going to just fall in love with her like we have, I'm sure. Couple of housekeeping items as we get going today. First of all, we are going to be recording this session, so just wanted to let you know that. And then also, there may be things we talk about that could be triggering for some people. And if that is the case, feel free to either, you can step out and step back in if you like. Jordan Dean is our kind of our IT coordinator here who's taking care of things and going to make this all smooth. And we also have counselors standing by should you need to talk with anyone. So if you do, feel free to just message us or send us a little chat in the chat box privately, and we will connect you with one of our counselors. So with that, Jordan, you've got some housekeeping things you want to share, right?
Yes, I do. All right. So today, if you guys are familiar with Zoom, unfamiliar with Zoom, hopefully this will be a little bit of a refresher. We are going to be utilizing four key functions. We'll talk about the first three. So the video. So it'd be awesome if you guys turned your video on. We can kind of have this really big discussion at the end during the Q&A, and Michelle would probably love to see your face while she's presenting instead of just a little black boxes everywhere. So if you're comfortable, please turn your video on. Feel free to turn it off as you need to. We will also be utilizing audio towards the end. So for now, if you guys will remain muted, that would be great. And then towards the end for the Q&A, we are going to do a verbal Q&A. So I will go into that a little bit more in just a second. If at any time during the presentation, if you have questions, comments, feel free to use the chat function. Ginger, myself, and Caitlin, our program director, who is also on, we will be monitoring the chat as well as the therapy staff that we have on as well. So please utilize that as you feel the need to. And then the last part, so we will be using the raise your hand function for the Q&A. So in this picture, you see that some hands are already raised, but in this green box right down here, it should say raise hand. And that is how you will raise your hand if you have a question during the Q&A, and we will call on you one at a time. And if you hear your name called, you can then unmute yourself, or I will unmute you, and you can verbally ask that question to Michelle or say your comment or whatever you would like to do. And then we will mute you again and lower your hand once we have called on you. So we will do a little bit of a refresher towards the end, but for now, I think that is all we need.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jordan. And if you have any questions during, any time during this webinar, feel free to go ahead and type that into the chat box, and Jordan will get right on that because that's what she does. Thanks, Jordan. As we get going here, we would like to poll everyone and ask a question for you. We are all, to a certain degree, victim advocates in our various roles, and we really would like to have you share with us what well, actually not that one. Well, I guess we can do that one. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Who are you? That's wonderful. So we've got a combination. We've got some CAC staff, law enforcement, mental health, other. Fantastic. Thank you all for giving us an idea of who you are here today. Okay, go ahead and end polling then. Thank you so much, everybody. You can kind of see what the mix of the audience is here. That's fantastic. And got one more question for you. And this is on a scale from 1 to 5. We're interested in knowing what impact do you think that your profession has on victims of trauma? Do you feel like you have very little impact? Do you feel like you have a huge impact? Minimal? Kind of where do you fall on the spectrum? Okay, so it looks like we've got Very, very good. Thank you. We may be asking you this again at the end to see if your perspective of this changes at all as you listen to Michelle's conversation. So again, thank you so much. And it's my pleasure now to introduce to you Michelle Corrao. And I first heard Michelle speak at a conference with MDT partners, and she was telling her story. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, who is this woman? And she is so courageous and so brave. And how can she stand up and talk about these horrible things that happened to her and be okay? I mean, but then I got to know Michelle, and I tell you what, this woman is the epitome of resilience and strength. Michelle is a keynote speaker and a compassionate advocate for victims of violent crimes. And for 16 years, she served as a victim awareness and victim advocate at a place called Prevail in Hamilton County, Indiana. And she also was responsible for leading the charge to begin Central Indiana's first ever sexual assault response team, SART, which many of you are familiar with that term. And she also, because of the work that she has done back in 2010, Eric Holder, who was then the U.S. Attorney General, actually presented her the Special Courage Award. And she also was the first ever recipient of the Distinguished Hoosier Award, which was presented by the then Indiana Attorney General. Currently, Michelle is the executive director at the O'Connor House in Carmel, Indiana. And that is a place where they help women who are single, pregnant, or homeless, and they offer safe housing and give them opportunities to help them improve their lives for themselves and for their kids. And Michelle is, gosh, she's always, I mean, she does a lot of public speaking, and she just launched her first ever book about her story. Her book is called Found, and it's a compelling, powerful read. So I encourage all of you to get this book, because it really is, it's amazing. And Michelle today is going to share with all of us her perspective as a survivor of a horrible assault, and talk with us about what we can do as first responders or responders later in the process to help victims of trauma. So with that, I give you Michelle Corrao. Welcome, Michelle.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Ginger. And I said this before, it's really an honor. Ginger and I go way back. And so it's so much fun to reconnect and be with you all today. So first, I want to say thank you. As I was looking at the poll, I do have a question. So no prosecution online with us today. Jordan, if anybody kind of brings in the chat that prosecution is on, let me know. I would love to know that, because I'm going to be talking about that a little bit. So just wanted to know that, but great. Thank you so much for joining today. This is my favorite group to talk to. You are on the front lines every day, and I cannot thank you enough for what you do and for the difference that you make. And I hope you feel appreciated today by those you help, and maybe they don't come back and tell you, but I'm here to be their voice to say thank you to them. And I hope throughout my presentation, you feel very much appreciated. So with that, I am going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see my screen. All right, there we go. I'm still getting used to doing this presenting on, I don't think I'll ever get used to it. I'm such an in-person person, and I love connecting. So bear with me. So I never ever have done a presentation without this quote, because I heard it several years ago in my healing, and it stuck to me. And it stuck to me because of how we treat one another when people are going through different things that we don't even know what they're going through. So no human interaction is neutral. It is either healing or wounding. So no human interaction is neutral. It is either healing or wounding. So when I heard this, it was very telling to me, because the interactions I was experiencing during the darkest times of my life the most recognizable ones were the ones that were wounding. And it was the questions that I was getting. And it was very damaging on my healing. So I think about that today and the people that maybe aren't so pleasant to me, and I wonder what they're going through. I wonder if they're experiencing some kind of trauma in their life, or maybe they lost a loved one, or what is going on in their life. So what I do is try to turn that around and be as kind as I can be, to try and be a wounding interaction. And I think it's just good for us just to remember that. We know that in our daily work, but sometimes it gets exhausting. You know, maybe when we're outside of work and we're in a drive-through and somebody's having a bad day, and, you know, we just wound them even more. So it just really touched me, when people didn't know, when I wasn't sharing my story, and I didn't want anybody to know what I was going through, but yet I was being treated differently. So I love this quote. Hopefully you can utilize it too. So now I'd like to introduce you to me. This is me years ago. So I'd like to introduce you to Michelle Meyer. I was at the time working a construction job, managing projects from ground on up. And the love of my life was exercising and running. So I was running the YMCA program, exercise program. And so right after my full-time job, I would be at the Y, doing my thing at the Y, and absolutely loved it. And I had been dating a guy for about a year, just beginning to trust him. And we built, you know, our relationship on a friendship, and everything for once in my life was going really well. So it's this beautiful day, September 12th in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I was on a job site, actually in Michigan too, on a job site, in a grand opening, a Chili's grand opening. So I came back from that grand opening, and it was 9:30 at night on September 12th. And I was really tired. So I was turned down my street, and I saw two guys walking down my street. And immediately my gut felt funny and said, don't pull up to my door. You know, it didn't feel right, didn't seem right. So I took a big long turn around a historic block in my, right by my house. So I thought I'll just drive slowly. And as I came back down my street, I noticed that they were gone. So I pulled my car up to the front of my house where I was living, and I grabbed my things out of my car and I walked up to my front door. And the next thing you know, I was on the ground. Have no idea what happened. You know, I assumed what happened, but as I lifted my head, I felt the warmth of the blood running down my face. And this voice came at me that said, if you scream, I will use this, as he shoved a gun to my face. I knew in that moment, there was no doubt I was going to die. You know, emotions, I can't describe what emotions I was going through, but I just knew that I was going to die. So I took the opportunity to beg him for my life. I said, take my things, take my car, you can have anything. I promise I won't tell anybody. But instead, he grabbed my things up off the ground and shoved the gun to my back and told me not to look at him. And in that moment, I was going to do anything he absolutely asked me to do in order to save my life. So he picked me up from the ground and my things, and pushed me down the steps of my front porch and shoved me to my backyard with the gun in my back. And as I was looking down, I saw 4 other feet and 2 other handguns. And they began to converse what they were going to do. And I tried to stay as cognizant as possible. And I, again, begged them for my life as they shoved me down to my knees on the ground. And I told them to take my things. I promise I wouldn't tell anybody. And of course, you can imagine, you know, what their language was back to me. And so again, I tried to stay cognizant of what they were going to do. And they began to tie my hands behind my back and blindfold and gagged me as 2 of them left to go get my car to drive it down the alley. So then I was trying to listen to what was happening, and I heard my car, and they dragged me across my backyard, and I was wearing a red suit. So a button-up jacket and a long skirt, and they took my shoes off and wanted me to climb the fence. And obviously there's no way that I could have. So they threw me across the fence and opened up my trunk and threw me into the trunk of my car. So, and again, I tried to beg them, not to do it, as I was voicing it through the gag, and they closed the trunk and they sped off. And I immediately tried to get my hands free in the trunk of my car. And it was very, very dark. I couldn't see a thing, but I recognized when they hit the brake, the light went on in the trunk. So I took an opportunity to search for a way out of the trunk. And I was too afraid to make any sort of noise, in fear that they would stop the car and come back and open the trunk and shoot me. So I tried to stay as quiet as possible in searching for a way out, and I couldn't find one. So I began to think, and I took off a ring that I was wearing. It was a diamond and ruby ring from my grandmother, and a bracelet from the guy that I was dating. So I took those off and put them in the crevice of my trunk. I have no idea how I could even function, or how my mind was functioning when I think back on that moment. But I thought at least somebody would know that I was in the trunk of my car if I left these items, and I didn't want them to have them. So I continued searching for a way out of the trunk, and I'm a very faithful person. So I did undo the blindfold and the gag, and I had my hands free, and I prayed to God that God would allow me to see my mom one more time so that I could tell her that I loved her, because I couldn't imagine, the heartache of my mom and knowing what happened to me. So I prayed to God, and that's when the car stopped, and they opened up the trunk and they pulled me out of the trunk, and were very angry that I had my hands free and unblindfolded myself and ungagged myself. So with great force, they tied my hands tighter behind my back, re-blindfolded and gagged me. And then they dragged me down a very gravelly alleyway. I could feel the gravel on my feet. And I just remember I had to take a step in, but I remember it felt like a very closed in area. And they took me, it was a garage. They took me into a garage. They ripped my clothes off, and all three of them took turns raping me and beating me and raping me in every way they could figure out. So I introduce you to Michelle Meyer because I did lose my life in that garage that night. I will never know who I would have been. It was more like an out-of-body experience, and I'm sure maybe you've heard this from other survivors before, but in order for me to even be sitting here talking to you and sharing my story, that was what I had to do to survive, was really have it be an out-of-body experience, and more like I was looking in on it. Of course, several times I gagged so many times. I tried not to feel the pain of what was happening. And so when they were finished, they grabbed me off of the ground and dragged me out of the garage and back down the alleyway and threw me back into the trunk of my car. So I went unconscious in the trunk of my car. And I don't know what time period lapsed, but I just remember coming to very faintly. And this time I heard a different voice. And this voice was stern. And I remember I heard this voice say, "I don't care if you have a gun." And I just thought, this is all going to happen again. This is some kind of drug deal. I mean, all these different things were going through my mind. I didn't ever think that I would hear this voice say, as I kicked on the trunk of my car, this voice came back at me that said, "I am Detective Arthur Billingsley of the Fort Wayne Police Department. Hold on, and I will get you out." I could not believe. I don't know if you've ever been in what seems like a real nightmare, but I have. And I actually thought this was just a nightmare that I was going to wake up from. And this dream was creeping in. So I kept opening and closing my eyes, thinking, this is not real. This is not real. And I'm sure Detective Billingsley, on hearing the thump on my trunk, was much more shocked than I was to know that there was somebody in the trunk of my car. So just a little bit background on Detective Billingsley. He happened to be on a child investigation case that night and was really exhausted. Single detective, always drives around at night when he gets off work. And this night he went home and he thought, I'm not going back out. I'm too exhausted. And as he got out of his car, he felt this nudge and he said, I'm not going back out. Felt another nudge. And I believe it was with the third nudge that he said, okay. And he got back in his car and he had a decision whether he was going to go right or left. And he turned right. And he turned right down a back side street that was behind a restaurant called Banditos in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And he saw two guys at the back of this restaurant. And he became suspicious. It was, later at night, it was probably closing time, but he thought, well, maybe, I'll hang out here. Maybe they need assistance. They're locking up. I want to make sure they make it safe. The two guys turned around and started running, and they ran into a wooded lot where my car was parked. And he saw the light go on in my car. And that's when he realized something wasn't right. And he chased those guys, and he was able to catch one of those guys that night because he was in the back seat of my car, and the other two fled. So now I would like to share with you, Jordan's going to share a video with you. So we're going to kind of exchange screens here. So bear with us. And I'm going to share a video of how the news media depicted the story that night.
Wayne Police Chief Neil Moore praising one of his own tonight for helping to solve a series of Summit City sexual assaults. Good evening, I'm Karen Hensel.
And I'm Lee Kelso. Our top story tonight, women in Fort Wayne now can rest a little easier now that the men thought to be responsible for as many as 4 sexual assaults are behind bars. The latest attack came late last night. The men allegedly abducted the woman from the 2400 block of South Wayne Street. She was walking to her apartment. According to reports, they hit her over the head and stuffed her into the trunk of her car. Police say they then brought her here to the 2900 block of Winter Street, where she was sexually assaulted. Their last stop, this lot in the 7500 block of Kinnerk, that is just south of Bandito's restaurant. And that is where News Channel 15's Mary Collins is right now to tell us about a series of events that have unfolded last night there.
That's right, Lee and Karen. It was a true nightmare for one woman, but fortunately a member of the Fort Wayne Police Department was in the right place at the right time. You see, after the suspects parked the car in the south lot, 2 of the men walked here to the back door of this Bandito's restaurant. That's where, fortunately, Detective Arthur Billingsley just happened to be searching this area. He saw the 2 men, scared them off, and they fled the scene. Now, they ran back to the car parked in that south lot. Detective Billingsley happened upon the car, didn't know anyone was in it. As he began approaching the car, the men fled the car. He caught up with one of those men, that man, a 19-year-old suspect. As he was putting that man into the car, he heard a noise coming from the victim's red car. That's when he realized someone was in the trunk, and he rescued the victim. Now, members of the Fort Wayne Police Department are calling Detective Billingsley a hero tonight. He says, however, he was just doing his job.
It's kind of hard for me personally to feel like it was any heroism when she suffered a laceration to the head, and plus she was, sexually assaulted. So, it's kind of hard to feel like a hero when someone has, gone through so much like that. Like I said, I think I really would feel like a hero if I could have, got to her before all of that happened.
But fortunately, Detective Billingsley did get out here last night before a life was lost. And since that time, members of the Fort Wayne Police Department have been searching for the 2 suspects that got away. And that's what News Channel 15's Deborah Cole has been working on all day. She joins us now live with more. Deb?
All right. Thank you, Jordan. You have to kind of make a little light of this because when you watch that video at the very end, they are so excited to tell a story that she is grabbing the mic, and that just makes me smile every time. But I think what really gets my heart is Detective Billingsley. And so you get an introduction, which is really cool, of Detective Arthur Billingsley, and how humble he is. But just to see him, share that side of it is very humbling. And it makes me just appreciate law enforcement all the more. So, so that kind of, sorry, I had the same problem. I can't advance my screen, so bear with me. I might have to stop sharing and then, sorry about that.
No worries, Michelle. It's all
Sorry.
good.
All right, now, can everybody see? Not yet? I have to share my
Not yet.
screen again, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Let's see if we can make this work. All right.
There you go. There you go. You got it.
There we go. Awesome. Okay. So I want to talk about the news media for a moment because I don't have that on another slide. I don't like that word, but it became a big word for me during the darkest times of my life. That word hate, I don't like it, but I will tell you, I hated the media. I didn't want anything to do with them. I didn't want to see the news. I didn't want any part of them calling me. I didn't want to see the newspapers. But yet, through my healing and through my service work with victims of crime and abuse, I have learned to make the media my best friend. And that was really healing as I began trying to learn more about each different discipline and how it was helpful and how it wasn't helpful, and so that I could help survivors. So as I reached out to the media, the gal who was sharing the story at the very beginning, at the desk, her name is Karen Hensel. She became a really good friend of mine when I started doing work in the Indianapolis area. And she actually moved to Indianapolis from Fort Wayne, and we started working together. And when the media would reach out for any kind of victim story, or I would make sure that in sharing the story, that they were doing it for all the right reasons and for all the good reasons, especially when somebody was sharing their story, and that they would provide resources for us who were survivors. So I think it's important for us to know as first responders that we can ask the media to do something for us. It's just not all about getting the story. It's about how are you going to help that survivor. So if you have the opportunity, and maybe you already have, I would like to believe in my heart that the media is getting better at that, but they need to know that too, because I'm sure there's a lot of pressure on them to do their job. But if we can work with them and educate on both sides, it's been very helpful in my healing and a lot of other survivors' healing. So after the trunk opened and Detective Billingsley, I was able to get out of the trunk. That's when the nightmare started for me. I didn't know. Everything seemed like there were thousands of lights around. Everything was chaos. There was nothing settled within me. I didn't feel safe. They wrapped me in a sheet and walked me to, I don't remember even if I walked to the EMS or I was on a stretcher. I still don't know to this day, but I just know I was in the EMS laying down, and the EMTs were looking at my head injury, and that is not what I needed. However, they were just doing their job. If you have an opportunity, I didn't put the video in here. If you have seen Captain Phillips, I would ask you to Google Captain Phillips, I'm Safe Now. There's a scene in there that when he is rescued, it's a true story, and Tom Hanks, I've never seen anybody play a better scene that was so real than Tom Hanks in this movie. That was me. That was my reaction. And then you look at how the person that first responder is acting and what they're doing. So that's like me in my head. All they were focused on is my head injury, and all I wanted from them was to say that I was safe and to recognize something that happened to me. So they had no idea how to respond to I began shaking. I began crying hysterically, I think, from what the police report says. And I was afraid. I was afraid, you know, did they catch these all three guys? Where are they? Where are we going? You know, what's happening? And I just needed some information. So here I am with the EMTs in the EMS on the way to the hospital and on the way to what I didn't know, the Fort Wayne Sexual Assault Treatment Center. I had no idea that something like that existed. I didn't even know what it was. Obviously, I knew it was, you know, they were helping with people who were sexually assaulted. So my immediate reactions, you can see them all, you know, fear, anger, denial, isolation, guilt, shame, embarrassment, shock, confusion, fear of being attacked again, not being believed, the unknown, trusting, tomorrow, living. All these things were just going round and round in my heart and mind. And I get to the hospital and I had detectives there, several detectives or police officers, to ask me questions, and they still don't know my whole story because there is absolutely no way I could even function or even answer them. And I almost became mad, and I know I was uncooperative, but I had no idea what was going on. And then I was waiting for the doctor at the hospital to look at my head injury, and they wanted to call my family, and I didn't want them to call my family. I didn't want my family to know. So they ended up calling Chris. It was the guy that I was dating, and he got to the hospital. There's a whole story about Chris and being on the scene too, that he was called because my friends were asking him where I was. So he came from the scene to the hospital, and he actually was very helpful that evening with the doctor, as the doctor was asking me, you know, not asking me, but just paying attention to my head. So as the doctor was looking at my head, you know, okay, I have to staple your head up. The doctor had no idea how to respond to me either. And that's one thing where we're really lacking, is education on how to respond to victims of crime and abuse. So, and I think we still are behind the times on that as well. He had no idea. He was just doing his job, as were the EMTs. So as I lay in the bed, Chris comes in and immediately kind of takes over and was my eyes, ears, and voice, which was super helpful, and told the doctor, do you think she might need a CAT scan? And the doctor said, that's a pretty good idea. So you can imagine now how I'm feeling, you know, the care that I am in and what's going on. And all I wanted to do was go home and take a shower. And so I want to talk a little bit about confusion. And as I was answering the questions to law enforcement in the hospital, once I got there, and, you know, the doctor had seen me, and I was going to go to the sexual assault treatment center, which was right in the hospital. I want to talk about confusion here and show you some pictures of the crime scene. Pictures that I got years later as I began to speak out, that have become really helpful, and that really means something to me in working with first responders, and the confusion that we have, even when we're, you know, law enforcement, when you're on a high-speed chase that doesn't, like, maybe you're pulling somebody over and it turns out to be something totally different, and all of a sudden you're in mode of saving lives and getting that bad person, and you know, everything kicks in high gear. But can you put into sequence exactly what happens when something like that happens on your shift? So that's what I was asked to do, and I couldn't do it. And now years later, when I look at these crime scene photos, I look at this first picture and I thought, I see my things inside the door. They must have, you know, this is an unsecure scene, right? They took these pictures after they tore down the tape, and, you know, they moved my bags inside. And then you know, the next picture, clearly I see the bags that I was carrying inside my front door. And as I answered questions, I didn't even get my door open. And then as I went to the next photo, I saw that I was actually knocked down inside my house. And I still don't tell my story that I was knocked down inside my house, because I do not remember putting my key in the door. I do not remember getting inside. So as we think about that, you know, when things don't match up right, we as people, you know, normal, regular people, I love this. I kind of put this in words. When society's expectations regarding the attack are not met, the victim's behavior is often re-examined to fit another scenario that we believe makes more sense. You know, the Child Advocacy Center, I have a good relationship with ours here too, but when you know, when you're working with parents and you're working with those kids, and especially with the kids, we all know that they can't, you know, it's hard for them to articulate what is happening in their lives when, you know, something is going on that is inappropriate with them. But we also have to look at the parents and what they're going through. And sometimes they can't answer according to what happens. They can't even function or think. And even us as society watching that news video, we like to check off the check boxes, like, okay, she was out late at night. Well, I don't go out late at night. Well, this wasn't in my neighborhood. You know, I can check that box off, which makes me feel safer. They don't know what kind of a person I was, but maybe they're thinking, she probably shouldn't have been doing what maybe she should have, you know, ran, or whatever it is. We try to match up so it does fit another behavior because it makes us feel differently. Or so it's just kind of a heads up that we can't put in during trauma, we cannot put things in a certain sequence, and we should never question that when we're talking to somebody. And it's really hard. I still am guilty of doing it because I want to feel safer and I want to feel differently. And you know, I want to keep my own world in a bubble, but it's just a reminder of, you know, that to listen, I think, more than anything. So who I became this person that I did not even like when I looked in the mirror. It was a really dark world for me. And this is where it's really hard to explain. When you are working with victims that are in trauma and you see the support they have and you're trying to help them, and you think, gosh, like I had a supportive mom and a supportive sister and some supportive friends, but none of that mattered to me. My world came crashing down and nothing was okay. And even though my mom was there to support, my mom wanted to cook for me and she didn't want me to cry. How could I be with my mom? I couldn't. I had to make that choice. That's not healthy for me right now because all I wanted to do was cry and I didn't want to eat. So nothing was okay with me. And I can't describe that. And I don't know that any other survivor can describe that, and why, even though with support, that we're not okay. So I became this very uncooperative person, probably in other people's eyes, because I was mad. I was mad at you, law enforcement. I was mad at you, advocacy, because you couldn't help me. You couldn't make it go away. And I wanted it to go away tomorrow. Now, what I came to find out was all the work that you actually did with me made a humongous difference. But I want to tell you who became my best friends. Fear, anger, and denial became my best friends, and I let it show. I pushed away people that were trying to help me most. But you can see all of these things as we go through them. You know, I was sad. I was uncomfortable in every and any situation. My world became my assault. I was isolated. I felt labeled. So many people knew that it was me. And I don't know how or why, because that's why things like this are so confidential. And it's so important that we keep them confidential. But word got out. And then I didn't know who I could trust. So guilt sunk in. Why did I even pull up to my door when I didn't feel comfortable about it? I should have ran. What else could I have done? You know, obviously I was depressed. I was withdrawn from the world. I was embarrassed and shocked. And as I said, uncooperative, and I was unrealistic in life. I could not go out after dark. There's no way. I clung on to Chris. I made him wait outside of the bathroom when I had to go to the bathroom. I felt totally unsafe, and that was unrealistic. I couldn't let anybody be behind me in the grocery, so therefore I didn't go to the grocery. I was going crazy. I had no interest in activities. My running outside stopped, so I bought a treadmill so I could run inside. I was numb and detached, and I had difficulty concentrating. I had nightmares after nightmares. I couldn't sleep. I was, up for 24 hours, more than 24 hours, 48 hours, and I still couldn't sleep after the assault. I lost, my self-esteem, and I was fear of contracting AIDS. And, I went to get an AIDS test for a year, even though I only needed to go for 6 months. I insisted on it being a year, as one of the guys said that he had AIDS as he spit on a guard. And of course, I asked for him to be tested. And we all know that I have less rights than my attackers do. So that's who I became. As I talked about the news media, it made headlines in the news for at least 2 years in the newspaper, because that's how long it took for the judicial system, for it to finally almost up to 3 years for all of the cases to be through. So what you don't know is I was the final victim in their series of crimes that summer. There were attacks on 5 other women. 4 other women actually came forward. The 5th was just couldn't do it. So what I needed, I think this is probably one of the most important slides in my presentation, because this is for all of you. And hopefully it helps in maybe some really difficult cases for you. But I want to tell you one of the most important things on this slide. And I mentioned it earlier, and it's to actually listen and be present. So I understand when I got to the hospital, I understand it today. I didn't understand it then, that those detectives and whatever law enforcement was there needed immediate answers for me, because they wanted to go get those 2 guys that were fleeing. Right? I mean, they had little time to do that in. I didn't understand that. All I needed was for them to be there with me and to actually be present and care about me. All I saw is that they were caring about the other guys and they weren't actually present. I mean, it was like I was like on a continual roller coaster or merry-go-round, and everything was moving around me and nothing was calm. Nothing was peaceful. I didn't feel safe. There was so much commotion going on. I just needed someone to listen and someone to be present. And if you could do that for just a few minutes, I know time is of an essence, but it'll go such a long way. And I know this was years ago, and I know we do things differently, but I just want you to remember that I knew I was more in tune to somebody actually listening and being present than there was anything else going around. And life is busier than ever right now. But I promise you, if you can give somebody your undivided attention for a few minutes, it makes a difference. And you can make that uncooperative person much more cooperative and helpful and really caring and mean it. Because those people that weren't present and didn't listen, I didn't take the time. And I pushed away a lot of people because of that. So when they really wanted to help me, I can tell you that really makes a difference. So the other things I needed to feel safe, obviously, I needed information. I couldn't hear what you were saying. So say it again, and maybe even say it a 3rd time. Sometimes it's about just sitting there. I want to go back to that being present. Sometimes it's just sitting there and not even saying anything, not even vocalizing anything, but maybe just saying, you know what, I'm just going to sit here with you just so you can breathe. I needed a chance to just breathe. and be present and to feel safe with somebody and know that somebody cared. It's not your words, because sometimes it's hard to think of what words to really say in this moment. And I've had a lot of advocates. Well, what do I say? And you know what I have to say? Sometimes I really don't know what to say. You know, I'm sorry this happened to you, but that could not be the right thing to say. So, you know, it's being present and just let me just sit here with you so you can feel safe. But I needed permission to express my emotions. It was really embarrassing when I read the police report, and to know, you know, it says, I was scared. And I said, these guys are going to come back and get me. You know, they told me they would. And what are you going to do about this? And how am I going to feel safe? And I was crying, and, you know, nobody can help me. But I needed, you know, permission to express my emotions, because it was embarrassing in that situation. And I was denying that it even happened still. So I needed to make my own decisions. I needed the affirmation. You know, maybe it was, for me, it was, I'm sorry this happened to you, and we care, and we're here to support you through it, you know. And here's what's going to happen next. So I needed to be able to trust you. I needed that respect, and I needed that privacy. And I know we all know that because you're affiliated with the Child Advocacy Center. I know we know how important privacy is, and that was ultimately very important to me. I didn't see if we had any SANEs, sexual assault nurse examiners, on today, but that is really important, that we don't let people enter the room when something is going on. That happened in my forensic exam when I got to the sexual assault treatment center. And then she took a phone call on her cell phone, which was unrelated. So I was very in tune to that, and I wanted to get off the table and just leave. So privacy is of the utmost importance. I needed one contact person. As you heard me say, there were so many people involved in my case, and that became chaotic for me, even ongoing chaotic. I talked about information. I needed a chance to breathe, some connection, and I needed to know that hope was within my reach. If somebody could have just given me some kind of glimmer of hope. So on the ride home from the hospital, I just want to tell you two things that was going through my mind. I looked out the window and I watched the cars driving by, and it relates back to the quote that I gave you earlier. I watched the cars pass by, and I wonder what they were going through, because I looked at my own self and I thought, oh my gosh, I wonder if somebody else is experiencing some kind of pain like this. And then I thought to myself, I've got to find somebody who I can see and talk to, who has been through something similar, to know that I can be happy again, or to know that hope is within reach, because I didn't feel like life was ever going to be good again. So then, as I'm trying to put one foot in front of another day after day, and as I told you, it was really hard to live each day and to wake up. And I thought, I'm going to do this today. But how I was trying to do it is, I wanted my old life back. I wanted to be who I was prior to that. And I fought for that life every day. And as I sought out a therapist and I tried to do all the right things in healing, it was going through the judicial process that became an ongoing battle. And I kept feeling like I was I would take a step ahead one day, and the next day, or even that same day, it would be like I'm taking 10,000 steps back. And this was my 10,000 steps back. As you see the headlines on this, state seeks to drop some charges against rapist. So I was rebuilding my life, and I had quit the YMCA and quit my full-time job to get another job, because there was too much talk going on and too many people knew my story. And I just needed to start a new life. So I started this new life and started a new full-time position, but then a part-time position working at a small workout center. And as I went in on a Saturday, I see this headline on the newspaper. And I thought, oh my gosh, I feel sorry for this person, because now this is my life. And as I began to read this article, It's about the guy that hit me over the head, that was the leader of the 3 guys, or 2 other guys. He hit me on the head and he raped me repeatedly. And this is how I found out that he is serving no time in my case. Granted, you can see he is receiving 320 years. But I will tell you another thing that's really critical is communication. We had some upcoming court dates, and my next court date, I walk in and I see the prosecutor and my victim advocate, and I immediately shunned them and turned my back to them, and I wanted nothing to do with them because they didn't communicate this to me. It was just a missed communication, not their fault, but that's what I did. And today I would have done things differently knowing what I know today, but I didn't know that. So I guess this is just a message that we can't see clearly as survivors. I couldn't understand this and I couldn't see it. But just remember communication, and they both apologized. And I know they were both very sad that they missed this, but it was a huge miss for me. So what went wrong was a lack of communication, as I said, lack of control on my part, knowledge of victims' rights. I had no idea. Nobody presented victims' rights to me. Knowledge of the criminal justice system. I'm still not knowledgeable on it. No matter how many times I do it, it's just different. And uninformed. And I really didn't know that I needed, I didn't know this going through it. I actually want to, I missed reading something in my book, and I want to go back and I want to read a couple of things from my book, excerpts in my book that will help. The first one I want to read, since I'm in the criminal justice, and I'm going to back up. One of the things I want to read is, it's about us as professionals who actually have had training. So in our professions, right? We've gone to school for our professions. So this is from my book. All these professionals, some with training specifically designed to help them handle a sexual attack, were singularly focused on the one person who had no preparation for this turn of events. I was confused, injured, in shock, exhausted, and terrified in a way that can only be fully understood by someone who has endured such a nightmare. The world around me was focused on punishing the perpetrators and preventing future crimes, but none of that could help me through the grueling hours and days that followed. Despite having family and friends in abundance, help did not come readily or easily. So this is what I didn't know, that I needed these things. And nor do victims know what they need in the time of going through their trauma. They have absolutely no idea. And they only know they already have been through it. And when all of you professionals are now out of their lives. So it's up to us to, give them that education and help them through it.
Hey, Michelle.
Yes.
Can I ask you a quick question? Someone has asked a question in the chat room related to what prosecution could do a little bit differently. And they ask, what could a prosecutor have said to you about dropping charges, even though he was getting 70 years for the whole case? What are your thoughts about that?
Thank you for asking that. I get that question a lot. So definitely give me a heads up. And, we see 320 years. He's serving 320 years. That's great. And when I saw that 320 years, what I thought was, I don't really care. He's not serving any time for me. What I didn't know was, all this would do if I had to go through a trial would cause me more heartache. And knowing that he was put away, and knowing that, it costs taxpayer dollars, it costs time, it costs when you could be doing something else to put somebody else away, or concentrating on the other 2 guys, knowing that he was put away for life. If somebody could have just sat down and explained that to me. What I needed was, I needed somebody to feel real for me, for real. I don't want to sugarcoat. I want realness. I don't want fluff. And I think we as victims, what we live through It's not fluff, so don't give us fluff. We want you to be real, and tell us the truth. Even though sometimes the truth is hurtful, I believe to have victim advocacy in when you're doing the communication is helpful, because you're not you are walking beside this person, but you can't be with them day in and day out like an advocate can be, once a week, or the communication. So I think it's really important for you to work with a victim advocate if you have them within your reach. I think that can be very helpful. I know that's what we have set in place in Hamilton County, where we work really closely with our criminal justice center and the prosecutor's office. So that can be very helpful. But just being for real with them and explaining, the prosecutor is a good friend of mine today, and so is my victim advocate. They worked really hard in my case. They worked super hard, and I didn't know that, and I couldn't see it. So it was really knowing what you're doing, behind the scenes in my case, not necessarily with everybody else's, but what is really happening. And that, yeah, it stinks that happened. Yeah, it really stinks that he's not serving time for you, but we want to show you the, positiveness of this, and how can we explain it so you best understand, and explain it again. And, we're here to support you. And just really be on their side, and helping them to understand that. So I hope that helps. Because you're in a hard situation. Prosecution is in a very hard situation, because we all know there's guidelines, there's rules, there's, you don't want a case to be dropped because of something, gone wrong or done wrong. You walk a fine line. And, today I understand that. I didn't understand that then. And unfortunately, the justice system, no matter what happens, it can be re-victimizing. And that's why I believe advocacy is so important, because, the attackers did have more rights, on their end, but there's a reason behind why they have more rights. I didn't understand that then. I understand it now. So it's an ongoing reminder of the trauma. The cases would be postponed, and I would be all ready to face, them and face their family members who had no good things to say about me or to my face. It was really traumatizing when their families would show up and call me names and blame it on me. So I was fearful that they were going to come, and get me and find me and kill me or do something. So, just that ongoing communication. So as Ginger told you, I believe that your team and a sexual assault response team are an important aspect of the healing for survivors. Truth. I remember, I'll just tell you one significant story with law enforcement and a SANE nurse. So I was on call 24/7 for sexual assaults. And after we had been to a sexual assault nurse examiner training, our law enforcement went with us, and us as advocacy. It was a great week of training together. We were called out on a sexual assault, get to the hospital, talk to the survivor, and law enforcement is there. The nurse comes out and says, okay, we had talked to the survivor prior to her going in to get the exam, and the nurse comes out and tells us where she has swabbed. And so it's kind of working together as a team. Well, law enforcement said, well, she said that he kissed her like behind the ear. I don't remember exactly where, but the nurse said, okay, she didn't tell me that, so let me go take another swab there. So it was kind of teamwork that brought this all together. And it may seem insignificant, but that's really significant of working as a team. Our team was built upon victim first, and really proud of our team here in Hamilton County, and that I got to be part of, building that team and working with them. But it's about those first responders that really make a difference. And we've seen so much within our team, so many differences and changes that we can make. And we are consistently and constantly trying to see what we can work and do better. So that's where you all fit in as a multidisciplinary team and how important it is that you are present and together and working together. I think it's really a big deal to work together for things that you don't know what you might discover and helping the survivor. So here's what these three guys have gotten. Usually I ask the question, why did the 19-year-old receive only 20 years? Because these are sentences that you do not see. We do not see enough of this, but because there are 4 other victims and they could be identified by 2 of the other victims, it was very helpful to go through the judicial process. And this is what we see is the 21-year-old received 210 years, the 23-year-old received 320 years, and the 19-year-old received 70 years. Why did he only serve 70 years? I know that most of you can probably answer this because he turned in the other 2 guys. He was the one caught that night. Unfortunately, the sexual assaults we see are by 80% of them are by somebody that they know. And unfortunately, they're harder to prosecute. And I'm very sad that we don't see, more prosecutions in sexual assault, but I know we're all trying and we're trying really hard. And I can't imagine, mine was done totally stranger. Now, one of the guys said that he knew me from the Y. It's still a stranger rape. I can't imagine knowing somebody that you trust and love, doing this to somebody and them not serving any time at all. So why are we needed? We are needed. It's hard to say because I am a survivor, but we have that power and control in the palm of our hands for the survivor in our words, in our actions, in our communication, because we have that control. Maybe they won't turn to drugs and alcohols because of what we said or what we did for them. Maybe they won't contemplate suicide because they know that you are walking along with them, that you are their support at times when they need or going through their case. Maybe they won't suffer so deeply from depression or post-traumatic stress disorder. So I do believe, I'm telling you, I do believe that we have that within us to make that change with them. We could save their lives through our words, through our actions, through just being present, through just allowing them to breathe for a moment. I want us to also not forget secondary victims. Sometimes they can be more traumatized than the victim themselves. I know I look at my family, and I gave you an example of my mom, how difficult it was for her. I can't imagine this happening to my daughter, and how my mom used what she needed to do for herself to get through this. But we need to, if they're waiting in the lobby at the hospital, to give them information, because what this does is to provide information and how they can help their loved one helps the victim ultimately, and helps you in doing the job that you have to do, because those secondary victims can creep in and become chaos for everything. So just remember to also support them. And it's providing them information. It doesn't mean that you're sitting with them or, but at least to provide them with some kind of information on how they can help their loved ones. I now want to read something that I wrote about the justice system too in my book. The justice system is imperfect for sure, and reliving the trauma was only possible because I knew it wasn't about me. The fight for justice was about more than fighting against those who committed crimes. It was about fighting for something bigger. I was fighting for the safety of women everywhere who have been brutalized and for a safer world. Court dates were postponed multiple times, and the resolution I longed for was prolonged again, and again. The waiting was excruciating. Every court appearance would bring me face to face with the pain, the humiliation, and the fear, not to mention the faces and voices of my attackers. Each time I had to recount the events of that night, I would go right back to that brutal series of events and reopen the wound. Every court date felt like I was being brutalized all over again. Having to choose between personal healing and public safety feels like a no-win scenario during the legal process. I could only hope serving justice would be worth the personal price I, along with the other women, paid. So now I would like to formally introduce you to Detective Arthur Billingsley. And this is my son, Christian Arthur, who is named after Detective Billingsley. So they're like best buds. Yes, he is his Uncle Art, which is truly amazing that I am able to share my story, but to share this best part of my story with you, and probably the most emotional part of my story. I am truly and totally blessed that this was the outcome, when the outcome could have been so much differently. I call Detective Billingsley my hero. He doesn't like it much, but he is my hero. He listened to that nudge. And I know I've been in several conferences where I've heard, listen to your gut, feel that nudge and act upon it. And that's what I tell anybody too, when they contemplate, oh, I hear this noise outside. And I always tell them, when in doubt, call 911, because you never know. We should always listen to our gut feelings. And I know law enforcement never, ever gets upset when somebody calls them. They would rather be called. So Christian, I'm going to tell you a few stories about my kids, but there's one other part in my book that I wanted to read to you when I was trying to explain to you who I had become and how difficult it was. And this is an insert that talks about who I became. And that's why I'm kind of hesitating, because I didn't read this to you, and I think it's really important for you to know. I tried to appear strong whenever I was around people, but in my heart, mind, and soul, a perfect storm was brewing. Every activity, behavior, attitude, or habit that was comfortable before the attack became a trigger. Even the personality traits that had defined me, trust, independence, fearlessness, and innocence, were altered. I felt unrecognizable in every way, and I didn't know where or how to find my way forward. So I couldn't help, but it was bothering me that I didn't read that. And I want to go into that a little deeper here in just a second. But so this is the amazing part of my story. And then this is my family. I say life doesn't get any better than this. I have that sign hanging 2 places in my house. One for when I get up in the morning and get ready in my bathroom, and then one for when I walk out the door every day. That says life doesn't get any better than this. And it doesn't. Look at this. My son, Christian Arthur, and myself, obviously, and my husband, Chris. Yes, Chris, who I was dating at the time, who never left my side, who I pushed away. He is the person I pushed away the most, but yet he stayed with me because he loved me. I still don't know how or why, but he does. He's has walked right alongside of me when he was my ears, eyes, and voice that night. And it was tough. He has his own story that he could probably give an hour presentation on his own story. And then our daughter, Olivia, who is truly amazing. You talk about legacy. Sorry, this is my legacy. My kids are my legacy that are going to push this forward and to give hope to others, and to hope that sexual assault will someday go away. And then our dog Prancer, who thankfully hasn't made a noise during this presentation because she's gotten really attached to people being home. So, so here's the sign that I have hanging in my house. And then I would like to share with you, I did this one other time in my last presentation, and I think this is significant. I want to share with you that our family got an opportunity to speak to 4,000 soldiers in Kansas City at Fort Riley, to the people who were in the Army. And it was the biggest honor we could have taken on. We were super blessed. We were more blessed than we could have blessed others. But so my family goes and spends a week on on Fort Riley base, and we spoke to 4,000 soldiers. And so I told you I'd tell a little story about Christian and Detective Billingsley. So of course they bonded immediately, and he's been his Uncle Art and my daughter's Uncle Art since they were born. We've done life together. We've gone to the hospital, and we've had kids. We've been to each other's weddings. It's just been a true blessing. And we've done a lot of work together. And one day, well, no, when he was giving this presentation, my kids actually presented and they answered some questions, and they were like, when Christian was answering the question, he goes, I put the Christian and Art's picture up, and Christian said, you know, I asked my mom, oh, is Uncle Art really my uncle? As Christian was really asking a lot of questions about, you know, does Uncle Art save a lot, you know, anyone's life? And, you know, we went through this whole story. And so I told my kids my story at a very young age, as much as they could hear. And then they asked questions, you know, a week later, Christian said, where did Uncle Art save you? You know, and I said, I was in the trunk of my car, and, you know, as much as they could handle. And so Christian gets up and he says, look, you know, don't I resemble Uncle Art? I told my, you know, when I asked my mom, is Uncle Art really my uncle? I said, yes, he is, you know, in our hearts. And he said, look, don't we resemble each other? So he really broke the, you know, the seriousness of the crowd, but he is truly amazing. And I want to just tell you, it goes along with my kids' favorite chapters in my book. Christian's favorite chapter is chapter 14. It's really beautiful why this is his favorite chapter. But he said, and this chapter is called the 4th of July. He said, because it shows that what is possible after tragedy, to realize that you can have a great life after a tragedy, that dreams do come true if you work hard at them. He says it gives him hope to have this kind of love, because this kind of love, we were actually engaged. It talks about the 4th of July being on Crystal Lake in Michigan, where Chris proposed to me. So there's a piece of Michigan in my book as well, which is really beautiful. But he said it's a beautiful love story. My son did. My daughter's favorite chapter, and I thought that was really cool in a book of such tragedy that he picks that out as his favorite chapter. I love that. And then Olivia's favorite chapter is Rescued. And it is when Detective Arthur Billingsley rescues me out of the trunk of my car. I want to read to you just a little a segment in that. And it says, I remember making eye contact with her. That's Detective Billingsley. And my heart just sank. And then I said, my mind was in total shock. I locked eyes with him. I felt a much needed rush of hope. That moment is really hard to describe in a book, but it is indescribable. And Detective Billingsley and I have that unbreakable bond of when our eyes met that night. So really unbelievable. And she said that when she spoke at Fort Riley, she said, you know, not that I would want this to happen to my mom, but my mom wouldn't be who she is if this wouldn't have happened to her. And I love who she is. So I thought that was pretty cool. Quote that's in my book that I absolutely love. I'm not interested in whether you've stood with the great. I'm interested whether you've sat with the broken. And that, my friends, is the most important thing we can do for somebody. So thank you for sitting with me and sitting with the broken. It makes a huge difference. And, you know, I'm going to go back and show you the picture of Detective Arthur Billingsley. And I want to tell you, somebody may not name their son after you, but they are going to remember what you did for them for the rest of their lives. They may not come back and say thank you. You may not ever hear from them again, but I promise you, they will remember the difference that you made in their lives. So here's my book information. We have lots of time to ask some questions. There is one thing that I want to tell you, because hopefully you might have this question, but I get this question a lot. Were there any aha moments of when I finally went, aha, I am all better today? There are many of those aha moments, not one significant one where I woke up tomorrow and go, okay, life is good, right? My life is better. Everything's over. It's great. It certainly did change my life did change the last day that I walked out of the courthouse for my last court date. I knew that healing would go much faster for me, and it did. But my friend wrote a letter to the judge, and this was a really significant aha moment for me. The letter is in the book, but it was a 3-page letter, and some of it's in the book. And it was the old Michelle and the new Michelle. And I'm just going to read a little bit of the old Michelle and the new Michelle and the message she was trying to portray. The old Michelle was always smiling. The new Michelle never smiled. The old Michelle was always boisterous when she talked. The new Michelle was so quiet, you had to strain to hear her when she talked. The old Michelle had a contagious laugh. The new Michelle never laughed. The old Michelle kept her office door open. The new Michelle kept her office door closed. And it just goes on and on and on how confident I was, and how I had no confidence, and I had no future, in mind, or a dream of a future. So when I read her letter, I thought, that is not who I want to be. And I forgave those guys. And it's not for everybody, but I forgave those 3 guys, because not forgiving them for me gives them my power and control. And I wanted to take that back. And reading that letter, I wanted a new Michelle, but in a totally better light. And not that I would want this to happen to me, but I can tell you my life is so enriched by the people who have crossed my life, by the service work that I found that I would have never found, being able to serve those who are in some of the darkest places. And for that, I will be forever grateful. I am so grateful that I have Detective Billingsley in my life. He's changed it for the better. And the first responders have changed it for the better. And I love the work that we get to do together. So I am amazingly overblessed, and much more blessings have come than not. So here's my book information, and here's my contact information. So I would appreciate it if you don't feel like you have to buy my book. I know I just did a presentation, and hopefully this will help. But if you do, I would love a review. It doesn't come out till February 9th. So with this, I want to tell you, the first person who raises their hand will get a book, gratis book. And Ginger will be sending that to you. So.
Oh, we've got the raised hand.
Awesome.
It's like Worry's song. Okay, so Jordan, you want to open the floor to Worry?
Yeah, so Worry, I am going to put my email address in the chat. If you will email me your information, we will make sure that that book gets sent over to you. Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
Oh, she says thank you. Worry, do you have a question? Should we unmute you? Do you have a question for Michelle? Or anyone else who might have a question for Michelle, feel free. Oh, it doesn't have a mic. Okay. No worries, Worry. No worries, Worry.
If you do have a question or comment for Michelle, go ahead and start raising your hands, and I will allow you guys to speak. I have that power. So raise your hand if you do have anything, and we will get started with the Q&A.
Okay, I have a quick question, if that's okay, unless someone else wants to jump in. But Michelle, and you talked about sharing your story with your kids. Do you remember like how old were they, and how did you first approach that conversation with them?
Yeah, good question. It was Christian was probably about 7 years old, and Olivia was 5. Christian began to ask me a few questions, as he did, some poster boards of Detective Billingsley, and told everybody, oh, I have my uncle's a detective, and shared, that about him. But it was when Christian said, Mom, has Uncle Art, has he saved anybody's life? Does he save anybody's life? And I said, yeah, every day. And then I began to think, this is going somewhere, so it's time to tell him. My husband would have waited much sooner, but he's much more old-fashioned than I am. And so I sat down and I began to share my story with Christian, just told him about these 3 bad guys. And, as much as I knew that he could take, and that's when he began to ask me questions in the following weeks. And then Olivia knew at 5, because that's when I was honored with the award in Washington, D.C. by Eric Holder, our attorney general then. And they did a video on Art and and she was I wanted her to obviously be there, and she was going to watch the video. So I got to tell her, my story and show her the video, and she's very mature. I mean, just a very mature, maybe that helped her be more mature, but that's when I told my kids. And I full-heartedly believe if we don't talk to our kids and we're not for real with our kids, we can't expect for them to share back and talk to us about what's going on in their lives. And trust me, kids have enough right now, especially with online learning and all the social media. It's frightening out there, and they need us to be real and talk to them. So
thanks for sharing that. And Michelle, you're getting a lot of comments from people saying, thank you so much for sharing your story and for your candor and, that kind of thing. And I'm going to read something here. This is interesting, just about talking about the brutal truth. This is from, it says, GCDA Metro to everyone. I appreciate you saying you wanted information, not watered down, but the brutal truth. I have had people look at me when I do that with victims. I always tell them that, how they get info is in their control. Do they want specifics, general? How do they want it? And some want more, some want less. And it's also good for people to speak with the family of victims, to prepare them a bit, which is so true. And so family advocates that are out there, your role is essential. And thank you for the good work that you do. So are there any other questions?
Yeah, it looks like
Yeah.
Tina Byers has a question. So Tina, you are good to go.
Thank you. It's actually beers, but it's okay. I just wanted to say, Michelle, first of all, it's just so wonderful that you're willing to put yourself in a very vulnerable state and share your story with us. That takes strength, and it's not often in our line of work that we get to see this level of strength. So I appreciate it. You said that. You're very welcome. So you said that you felt like you had wished somebody had been there that really could have related and understood what you were going through during that time. Is that correct?
yes.
Okay. So have you ever heard of peer support services?
No.
Okay. So I think I hear that you're out there utilizing and helping others. And I think that's something, unfortunately, that might not have been around when you were going through that, but it's around now. And so I just wanted to kind of bring that to your attention, because
I wrote that down. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Is it where they can call anonymously? Is it online? Is it, what is it?
I particularly work with community mental health. I'm also a foster care provider. So you kind of use it in all aspects. It really goes into anything, any kind of trauma-informed care. And I can meet with people in their own environment, and I can meet with them in my office, whatever they're comfortable with. I meet them on their level, and we have shared or even common things that we have been through together. And so we work really hard to kind of match people up with relatable and some relatable events that have taken place in a person's life, so that when we are there for them, we are focused, we are listening, we're giving them basically everything that you said you really needed, because as we know through trauma, you need somebody to be present, somebody that can just listen and be there with you.
Right.
Hey, Tina, where are you? Tina?
I'm in Manistee, Michigan. So yeah, I work for, go ahead. I work for community mental health for Central Wellness here in Manistee.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, if you don't mind, like sharing your contact information about the peer.
Absolutely.
That would be, if you can share it in the chat, that would be wonderful. So we can maybe even, share it with everybody. That would be great. It's a wonderful resource. So thank you so much for speaking up.
Yeah, thank you for that. And one thing that I did when I was with Prevail, I started a speakers bureau, which was huge because we had so many survivors that have, you know, went through a group or a program or led a group that wanted to share their voice. And I put together the Speakers Bureau, and it really was amazing and so empowering and healing to others. Thankfully, it's still going on, but they utilized their voice in our community. For first responders, it made such a big, huge difference educating our community on just trauma. And it was really helpful and empowering to them too. So another thing that is good. I also would say that if you have an opportunity, if somebody is healthy and doing this work, and because when I very first started doing this work, I didn't share that's not ethical, right? To just go blah, you know, here's my story. Or if somebody's telling your story, to say, oh yeah, that happened to me. Never have I done that. I've just had opportunities where people have asked me to come speak, and it started gradually, very gradually, because I didn't want to talk about it, but it has been super duper healing for me. But you have to make sure that they're healthy, in a healthy place where it's not re-traumatizing. But to have a survivor on your board, to include them in your sexual assault response team, or your, you know, ask them, you know, hey, what can we do better? You know, but you know, keep them in mind for when you're changing your policies, or, you know, what work that you're doing, or how can you help more, what more services can you provide, you know, include them when you're doing things like that, or making changes, or trying to do better.
Good advice for sure.
Looks like
Are there go ahead.
yeah, we do have another question in the chat from Michelle. She said, what is your favorite resource to use with children of survivors?
The Child Advocacy Center, depending on what they have in place, you know, so, I mean, that's what I would say. And I rely on our community and our resources on that. I've been a little removed from that for a year, but I would say I would check with, you know, Child Advocacy Center on, you know, therapy or programs like Prevail, you know, depending on their age. What we have our victim advocacy here that meets, you know, one-on-one. And I think it's to what level they need, you know, what supportive services they need. You know, is it as much as, you know, therapy or advocacy? So sorry, that's probably not the best answer, but that's where I would start, because I'm sure that Child Advocacy Centers have resources.
Mm-hmm. Good question. It's interesting too that someone else is making a comment about the whole chronology of events. And, you know, I know that here in Michigan, we always try to explore an alternative hypotheses when we're talking with kids that are participating in forensic interviews, to try to make sure that we aren't, you know, in our own minds trying, you know, putting a story to to what their story is. So that was interesting. So there's a detective who chimed in and said that they appreciated, you know, that reminder to not jump to conclusions and thinking that we know what happened when maybe we don't. So are there other questions? Any other questions? Thank you, Tina, for sharing the peer information. It's in the chat box if you guys want to see that. So you're getting some little thumbs up and that kind of thing. Michelle, what haven't we asked that you, like, are there other commonly asked questions that you get during your presentations? You were, New York last week talking with a group, and you're all over the place. So
yeah, you know, the prosecutor question, and I covered that. Yeah, I mean, there's, you know, there's a lot. It was very interesting, you know, as I touched on Chris a little bit when he spoke to the 4,000 soldiers. We spoke like 4 times. It was 1,000 soldiers each, but that was the first time he's ever really spoken, and the first time I've heard his truth and just how he felt. and how he wanted to leave. But when he drove me home in the car the next day after, my assault, he looked over at me and he said, "I saw the shell of a person." And just what he went through, I think, is really, that's why I say secondary victims are so important. He went and got, some help. He went to a therapist. I went obviously singly, and then we went together. And I believe that's how, we were able to survive it. But yeah,
Well, thank you so much for your candor and your grace and for sharing your story. And I feel so lucky to know you.
Oh,
really
back at you.
Well,
Back
no,
at you.
I so appreciate just all the work that you've done and you continue to do, Michelle. So thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And you can always go see Michelle on her website, check her out. If you want to reach out to her, she's always open. I mean, you're just one of those.
Yes, please feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions. I love to hear from you, or if I can help out with anything. So
yeah, good.
And,
well, thanks so much, Michelle.
Thank you all. Thank you for the work you do. Take care, everyone.
There will be a feedback survey being sent to you all this afternoon. So if you do not mind filling that out for us, we appreciate all of that. This is the start of a series of things that we are doing for free for the community and for MDT. So if you would please fill that out, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thanks all.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So Michelle, are you traveling for the holidays or are you sticking around?
No, it's going to be different, kind of like Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah, right.
Trying to do our part in keeping, everyone healthy. So we're really not sure yet it just depends on what happens,
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
I'm kind of sad Christian won't be home until like the 18th.
Where is he?
He's at school. He's at Ball State.
Oh,
Ball
is he?
State.
What's he studying?
Architecture.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
They've got a great architecture school.
They have a great architecture school and he's doing great, but now since he went back for Thanksgiving, they are all online, but he was mostly in class.
Oh, wow. Holy cow.
Yeah, because of the architecture program. But he lives in a house, and so they're still doing a lot of work. It's through the church. And so he's still doing a lot of work with that, but it's better for him to concentrate and be at school. Because when he's home, we are such family people. We'll watch a movie. We'll, you know what I mean?
Right.
Carry out. We'll, play a game. We'll do anything but work. So,
right. Oh, I hear you. No, 100%. That's the way it goes. What year is he?
He's a junior.
Is he really? Okay.
Mhm.
Well, I have got two brother-in-laws in Chicago that are both architects. One's residential, one's commercial. So if you ever need like an internship or a connector or something, let me know.
Oh, that's great to know.
They are wonderful. So
good. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
That's
good.
awesome.
Well, I will probably just go ahead and end this then.
Yes, I will end it here shortly. So Worry already reached out to me, so I will be sending that information to you, Michelle.
Okay.
Oh, very good for the book. Yeah.
I will get that. I'll get that in the mail this week.
Sweet.
Okay.
To you. Cool. So did she give her address? Am I going to send it directly to her?
Yeah, she emailed me saying, I already forgot what you asked me to send you. So can you email me again with what you need me to send you?
Aww,
so
that's cute.
So yeah, her home address so that she can grab that from you.
Okay, perfect.
Well, and bravo on the book signings and all that. What